All right, without further ado, Noah, take it away.
Cool, and I guess I'll just introduce myself really fast. I'm Noah Goodkind. I'm the YIP intern for Riverwatch right now. And so one of the main projects I've been working on is sort of updating this story map. So I've been updating it with the current station information, and I've also added a few maps to it. So yeah, I'm excited to give you guys a quick overview of it. And at any point, interrupt me, ask a question, how to do something, or if something's not clear, and happy to talk about it. So let me show you guys the story map. And I will also just throw a quick link to it in the chat if you want to open it while I'm talking at any point. So this story map that Winston started is awesome. It's a really cool way to visualize where our stations are and sort of give a broader context to the Riverwatch program. So when you sort of come to this first page, you'll see a whole bunch of tabs up here and our little introduction page. So if you want, you can read through this, but essentially it is giving an overview of the Riverwatch program and a quick little teaser of sort of water quality standards and how stream segments are broken down. But I think the coolest part about this story map in the app is actually digging into it and going into each individual tab. So we can start with the state. I'm just going to start with a really broad overview of the state of Colorado. And so if you remember from our training, we sort of talk about the greater watersheds in Colorado. So sort of the 5 big ones you can see visualized here with the Colorado, North Platte, South Platte, Arkansas, and the Rio Grande.
Jenny, where are you guys located?
Steamboat Springs, we're on the Yampa River.
Perfect. Okay, good. We have some Yampa. We've got Colorado, giant, right? Colorado takes up the entire slope, which is great. On kind of the western half, Scott's in that area. And then our buddy Jerry Cordova is down in Colorado Springs, just joined us. So we've got Arkansas represented, and then Riverwatch's headquarters are in the South Platte. So despite kind of a small audience, we're representing kind of a big part of the state today, which is great. Thanks, Noah.
Yeah, and so then if you work down through these tabs, it sort of advances the story, if you will. So we can move on to the next tab, which is then going to show our major basins that the state of Colorado uses to divvy up sort of stream segments. And so obviously the giant Colorado basin gets broken down into the Yampa, White, Colorado, Gunnison, Dolores, and San Juan. And so these are mainly used for assigning water quality standards. So if we keep moving, we can visualize where all of our Riverwatch stations have been. This is going to be all of our previous stations that are no longer active, and you can see in green we have all of our active stations, and really it's just a smattering of Riverwatch stations through the 30 years that Riverwatch has been around. It's sort of hit every single corner of the state, and what's really neat with this tool is you can zoom in on a specific station, and if any of you, if Scott, you want to give your station, or Jenny, if you guys want to give your station, we can find yours on the map. I think you might be on mute. You can also throw it in the chat.
Jenny's at station 607 in
Awesome.
Steamboat Springs.
607.
You guys all need to know that before Jenny typed that in, Michaela, of course, knew that because that's how good she is.
And generally, where would your station be?
Steamboat Springs, Noah.
Okay.
Close. Station
Alrighty, so we found your station here up in Steamboat, 607. So that's one of the really powerful things about the story map is that embedded in each station, we have a whole bunch of metadata that you can dig into. So the one that's being visualized is your station active or inactive? And your Steamboat High School station here on 5th Street Bridge is active, so it shows up in green. And then you can also go through a bunch of information about your station. So, you have your station number, station status, which is being visualized. And then we can go down to the water body ID, water code, a whole bunch of different ways to designate where the station is. And so the water body ID is used to assign the water quality standards. This is a really long, confusing code, but generally it's broken down as state of Colorado, so CO for the first 2 letters. And then UC is Upper Colorado, and then the YA is Yampa, and O2B means closer to the headwaters. So 1 is going to be at your headwaters, and the higher you go up, the further downstream it is. And so there's specific water quality standards that are assigned to that water body ID. But station type, chemical sampling, and some more watershed information can be found in here. Another awesome one is the elevation for each station. Also the ecoregion. So there's a ton of information to explore in here, and you can click around to different stations and it should all pop up. So then moving on to the next tab, we can get an overview of the historic precipitation in the state, which should be noted, it is 1950 to 1980, so this is a little bit outdated, but the general trends should hold up. And Colorado being a headwater state, a lot of the precipitation originates up in the mountains here. So we have all our high precipitation zones, with a lot of that being snow in the winter, up in the mountains, and then sort of less yearly precipitation as you move down to the plains or onto the western slope over here. So the next tab will only show our active stations. So these are all of our stations for 2021 and 2022. So pretty much all of these stations here are sampling right now, which is super cool. There's a whole bunch here in the Roaring Fork, a bunch down in Compadre, a whole bunch on the Front Range as well. And there's our Steamboat Station up here. So if you want just what's being sampled now, you can come to this tab for the active stations. And so one of the maps that I made is this number of samples per station tab. And so this one breaks down of our active stations, how many samples have actually been collected at that station. So there's sort of 5 main categories that they can be broken down into. The lowest being a single sample up to 12. That'll roughly translate to a year of sampling if a sample is collected once a month, sort of a really rough loose correlation. But next 12 to 36 samples, that's going to be roughly 1 to 3 years, 36 to 120 samples collected, sort of 3 to 10 years roughly, if that's once a month, and 120 to 240. So I guess, yeah, 10 years, and 10 years on to our highest number of samples collected, which is 460-ish. So this is really fun to see where we have sort of the most data from our Riverwatch stations, our longest running data sets. So if we want to click around on this, we can go up to that Steamboat Station. And so there's been 49 sampling events since I uploaded the data in this January. So, you know, a super long running data set, which is really, really awesome. And we can, you know, further explore it and find our longest running Riverwatch station. It's been going since 1991. It's going to be over here. Near Buena Vista, and there's 457 sampling events that have been taken from here, which is really mind-boggling. There's been 30 years of data, which is super, super awesome.
One of the pieces that Noah put in here kind of unprompted were some questions kind of in that left bank, like see if you can find the Riverwatch station with the most sampling events. And with these maps designed to be these great interactive tools, you can kind of prompt that activity of your user by putting in a few questions on the side. So I really liked that integration, Noah, and you might have given away the hint on this one. So we'll just have to update that with find the second highest or something. But Jenny, as I'm thinking about your class, or Scott, your class, or the way, you know, Jamie, you might interact with story maps in your programs is, you know, how do you encourage folks to scroll around and really understand these to as much depth as they can?
Yeah, there's just a huge amount of information that can be displayed visually. And it's really fun to do sort of a deep dive and pick individual stations as you scroll through tabs. And obviously you get to see where we have the most historic data. There's a bunch down here, a bunch right along the Gunnison in here. These are super long-running stations that are sampling this year. And so the next map that I made is very colorful. But what this one is trying to represent is these water body IDs that water quality standards are attached to. They sort of allow decision makers to assign if they're achieving their standards or not, if they're above or below. So two of the lists in the state that are required by the Clean Water Act is the Section 303D list, which is sort of will show the areas where in the state where there's like the most water quality issues, the most impairment going on. And another one is the M&E list, which is the monitoring and evaluation. So that one, there's reasons to suspect water quality impairment issues, but there's remaining uncertainty. And so what this map does is, of our active Riverwatch stations, it shows what the stream segment, where the station is, where it falls on the list. So obviously there's a whole lot of water bodies in Colorado that are on the 303D list, unfortunately. but we have Riverwatch stations on them so that we are actively providing data for these water bodies to see if they are improving, maintaining the same levels, or getting worse. So some of the information that you can find in this tab, if you click into the metadata, is the category, which is sort of the impairment status. So the category 5 is going to be the red ones on the 303D list, and it'll actually show you what the specific impairment for that stream segment is. So for here in Meeker, it's water temperature that it's not attaining. If we go to Steamboat, it's going to be total arsenic in the water and temperature on the Yampa here. And then for the ones that are on the M&E list, it'll also show you what needs to be monitored. So dissolved oxygen for this station. Again, this provides a whole bunch of information, and then you can also click either of these two links to learn more about the 303D list and M&E list, or go to a CDPHE map, which provides even more information. I can quickly show you where that goes, but this will show you every water body in the state, once it loads, their status. And if you click on individual streams, you can get a whole host of information. And that's another cool function of the story map itself, is that you can link additional information within the story map. So I guess moving on in our story, the next group of tabs is going to be breaking down the state by basin. And so this starts with the zoomed out version of the Arkansas. And as you move through it, you can work into the sub-basins that are defined by the state. And then you can see each Riverwatch station that is contained in the sub-basin, or in the basin. And these are colored by water body ID, which it's very colorful, but you can generally follow the major waterways and sort of see that they maintain the same color. They have a similar water body ID. Then when you work down, it'll change to a lower or a higher water body ID number. So going up, and this is for each of the subbasins, so you can explore it and find your station, or you can just sort of try to follow along with the water body IDs as they change. Just another way to sort of group our Riverwatch stations. And we can go to the Yampa and to the Steamboat Station again. It's worth noting that these are all active and historic stations, so there's a ton of stations that are grouped in here. But here's our Steamboat Station again. And yeah, there's an older station here, and it has the same color because it has the same water body ID. Yeah, so with that, if you guys have any questions, anything more you want me to talk about, let me know. Also, any feedback of things you might want to see in here that isn't in here yet.
And Jenny, if your students wanted to dig into Riverwatch data and they wanted to help us make our story map even better, that's always an option, right? I love the iterative nature of this, that it's not a one-time thing, that Noah has created those two really incredible maps that, you know, the 303D list that kind of integrates with standards. He was like, I'm not sure how to do this, and, you know, figured it out. So it's it's relaying these really complex standards and assessments across the state with our individual Riverwatch stations. So that's just an option for you or Scott or Jamie, like any of your students, if they wanted to help us make this better or curate it. We started with, NOAA has created this entire active station tab with now, samples per station and water quality standards and Riverwatch stations. The other thing we could do is go through the back end of like, how does this work? Or if your students have questions, no, I'm sorry, I'm offering your help. But if they had questions of like even how to navigate it, he's definitely learned some tricks, which have been beneficial. So I'll let other folks ask some questions at this point. Nice job, Noah.
Great job, Noah. I do have a question. Is it possible, I know some of the sites have, they use actual gauges, and is it possible for you guys to know which sites use the active gauges and possibly have, if those gauges have live readings, could we get live readings off of this map as well?
That would be awesome. That would be way beyond, I think, what I could do in the StoryMap functionality of it. But it would be interesting. I think you can map which stations have gauges attached to them. So that's a good idea as a possibility.
Could you just link to the USGS gauge site from the dot on the map? I feel like that's how I access the gauge for our site, is I go to a map and that looks very similar to this. And I just click on the dot where our station is and it shows us the live USGS gauge data. But
Yeah, that's also a great idea for like add a quick extra step for someone to be able to get there quickly. I can look into adding that as well.
And then I have a question. This is a very basic question because we have not done anything with story maps yet. This is our very first dive in. Like, are you like somehow building and designing these maps from scratch, or are you entering GIS coordinates and information and then the story map technology is populating the map for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our like story maps and ArcGIS Online make it really easy, which is really awesome. Basically, I am just taking the raw data from the database, which has the latitude and longitude, and uploading it. And this ArcGIS Online will actually use the lat longs to automatically plot the stations, and it attaches all of the metadata information that you upload with your CSV file with it. So when you click on a station, these are your columns, and this is the data that is attached to the station. So I'm essentially uploading a CSV for a lot of these. So once you have the information you want to upload with a lat long, you can upload it to ArcGIS Online, and they do a lot of the hard work for you.
And I think, Jenny, like you kind of customize your template, like what you want it to look like and like what colors you want it to include, how many sidebars you want. Do you want it to have a map? What's your base map looking like, right? We chose this one, which is fairly neutral, but shows some of the terrain features. But I think those are all customizable within Arc StoryMap itself to kind of come up with a template that works for you. Yeah, Jamie, what else have you come up with?
So ArcGIS also allows you to layer the maps. So you can actually turn layers on and off. So if you wanted to add topography, you could add that. If you wanted to go by just all the pH data, you could look just by, you sort it by pH, you could sort it by, alkalinity and hardness. And also just so you know, teachers, most school districts get like a free package for being an educator. At least that's what I I have heard my school district, we don't pay anything. So I think there is availability to for school districts to really expand with exploring within ArcGIS.
And yeah, just as a note, everything made here is license free. So you have a decent amount of functionality without paying anything in ArcGIS Online.
But that's my dream for Riverwatch, right? Where we could have like a pH tab and show pH across the state. And we could pull up copper and say, oh, these are the regions around the state where we have really high copper data. So again, what I like is this iterative capacity that there's, so much more that you can do, that you can kind of do it fairly quickly. But that, it can be updated relatively easily. That's the goal. There's a lot of QA/QC that goes into this, and we want to make sure that what we're putting out publicly, has gone through that rigor, but also helps people explore and ask additional questions. So yeah, I literally, Jamie, before this, got off a call with folks using Survey 123, where I think you do see some of that live time updates. And again, just like putting my toes in. So I'm always curious and love learning from others about how do we visualize Riverwatch data better, and how do we serve all of you who want to take it that next step and say, okay, I collect my data at the 5th Street Bridge every month, but like, how does that fit in with these bigger contexts? So yeah, we're open for opportunities to learn and expand, but I just think that would be really neat if we had students who kind of, were the curators or owners of different pages to kind of pull that together, or that, if somebody does it for copper, it's easy to do it then for lead, or whatever that looks like.
So Megan, my students came up with that when they were doing Survey 123. They found that one of the hardest things was actually phrasing the questions to collect the data that they wanted. But you can use QR codes. So at some of these stations, we could have, depending on where they are, but you can actually have like a QR code made, and it will, people on their cell phones can just scan it and link to a survey. And so there could be more data collected at these sites than just, Riverwatch students, if they only go once a month and they're actually collecting the samples, but possibly people could be walking by and saying, wow, it's really high today. Or we even just, noticing, oh, there's, like a certain type of species that is out there. And so there's definitely ways to expand that. That could also tell if it's staying as a healthy ecosystem or not. And so my students were just brainstorming ideas, and that's some things they mentioned.
Oh, that's fun. I've chatted with some folks at state parks where we like maybe have a station right in a state park where there's already raptor monitoring, bluebird monitoring, right? Where there's some kind of, sign with this QR code that like you link in and you get all the water quality data, but you also see what's happening with bluebird. So, I mean, there's so many neat opportunities. That sounds neat. Awesome. Scott, any questions? Is this something you've explored or interested in with your students? Just put Scott on the.
Yeah, I just think it's super cool. I kind of agree. It would be neat to be able to like access all the data, some kind of like link in there. My brain's kind of turning of like how to incorporate it like in a with students or something like that. Not really sure yet, but yeah, it's super cool. I like it too, just to be able to see like where the stations are at, like as someone that like thinks visually too, instead of being like, oh, I wonder, like I've messed around with the database before just to like out of curiosity to see what numbers are. But I think it's cool to be able to be like, oh, that's where that station is. So yeah, super neat.
Yeah, I think where it is now is, I think that's the biggest advantage to it, is if you are curious if there's a station somewhere, you can quickly, find it on a map, say, that's where I'm interested. If there's a station, if there's data, and you can click it, find the station number, and then go to our database and actually download the data.